In recent times, Western countries like Canada and the US have tightened their immigration laws. And now these laws have begun to be felt not just by ordinary Africans seeking to enter these countries, but also by Africa's elites. In an interesting turn of event, Canada denied the visas of top Nigerian military officers, including that of Nigeria's Chief of Defense Staff, Gen. Christopher Musa. The denial has sparked outrage among Nigeria's elite who deem the action disrespectful. But why were the visas denied? What are the reactions of ordinary Nigerians to this event? And what can African countries learn from this? Let's find out. On January 31, 2025, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, IRCC, updated Canada's immigration and refugee protection regulations to strengthen authorities to cancel temporary resident documents. These changes give Immigration and Border Services officers explicit authority to cancel electronic travel authorizations, eTAs, and temporary resident visas, TRVs, on a case-by-case basis. According to the authorities in Canada, these changes enhance the integrity of Canada's temporary residence programs and are expected to strengthen security at the border and within Canada. Now, 2 weeks after these changes were implemented, the Nigerian Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, revealed that he and other top military officers were scheduled to travel to Canada for an official assignment, but were denied visas. Speaking on the issue, the CDS stated that he and his colleagues were blocked from attending an event in Canada meant to honor war veterans. We were invited along with our team, but while half of us got visas, the other half were denied. It's very disappointing, he added. According to General Musa, the visa denial is a reminder that Nigeria must stand on its own, stand strong as a nation, and ensure it is no longer taken for granted. Following the news of the visa denial, many other Nigerian politicians have dropped their thoughts regarding the situation. Speaking on Sunrise Daily, a program on Channels Television Nigeria, Nigeria's Minister of Interior, Olubunmi Tunji Ojo, has stated that the denial of a visa to the Chief of Defense Staff, Christopher Musa, by the Canadian High Commission was disrespectful to Nigeria and Nigerians. He said, "As much as we are not ready to interfere in the sovereignty of other nations, the issue of visas and migration management is a sovereign matter and the right of every nation. As much as we do not want to interfere in that, I believe it is not just disrespectful to the Chief of Defense Staff. Without knowing the full facts, I consider it disrespectful to the country and to us as a people. If this can happen to the Chief of Defense Staff, then I am worried for the average Nigerian," he added. During the interview, the minister also said he found it difficult to justify Canada's actions, adding that diplomatic channels could have been used to address any concerns. Without knowing the full facts, I believe that even for us in terms of visa policy, the issue of reciprocity, as I always say, must be given due consideration, he said. Before we proceed, here is a reminder to like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe to our channel so that you can get more videos like this. However, according to a source close to the matter, the Canadian Embassy denied the Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, and top military brass a visa due to a diplomatic error. Apparently, they applied for Canadian visas without note verbal, a diplomatic note from the Nigerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He said, "At this level, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs ought to attach a note verbal indicating that the trip was genuine without security implications." But the Nigerian federal government has stepped into the matter and is trying to salvage the situation. However, since the visa denial, the Canadian High Commission in Nigeria said it was aware of the matter but declined to give further details for privacy reasons on the specific individuals involved. The Nigerian National Security Advisor, Nuhu Ribadu, joined the list of those that have condemned the actions of Canada. Speaking at the maiden annual lecture of the National Association of the Institute for Security Studies in Abuja, Ribadu said Canada can go to hell. Ribadu hailed the Chief of Defense Staff for speaking openly about the incident and called for a stronger Nigeria that would no longer be taken for granted. He said, "Thank you for the courage to say Canada denied you visas. They can go to hell. Even though it's painful, it's disrespectful. But we are peaceful and strong, and I agree with you that it is time to fix our country. Yet, this is another reason we work hard to make Nigeria work." Ribadu also praised General Musa for his leadership in the fight against insecurity, highlighting the ongoing collaboration among Nigeria's security agencies to strengthen national security. The Nigerian, former Minister of Aviation, Femi Fani-Kayode, had hailed Ribadu since his comments, saying Nigeria must not ignore such disrespect. In a post on his X account, he said, "At last we now have an NSA that has some balls and that is prepared to stand up to foreigners that treat our people with contempt." Nuhu Ribadu was right when he said that the Canadian embassy was being disrespectful by not granting visas to some of our military top brass, including the CDS, who were scheduled to attend a formal event in their country. He also told them to go to hell. Proud of you, Nuhu. The days of foreign governments kicking us in the teeth and getting away with it are long over. What makes this case worse is that Canada may not even be a sovereign, independent country for much longer if at real Donald Trump has his way, and may end up being the 51st state of America. Imagine a conflicted entity like that which is not sure of its own future treating our senior military officers with contempt. They should not only go to hell, but they should also go and jump in the lagoon. Nigeria has paid her dues and must be treated with respect. However, the reactions of ordinary Nigerians to the visa denial are in contrast to that of Nigeria's elites. Across social media platforms, ordinary Nigerians have applauded the news and Canada for denying the visas. They say that Nigerian politicians should learn to stay in their country. The reactions of Nigerians is a clear indication of what is going on in the country. The economic and political situation in Nigeria is bad, with the cost of basic things rising every day. Yet Nigerian politicians find it very easy to move around the globe instead of staying in the country to fix things. Now, Nigerian politicians have said that the denial of visa by the Canadian Immigration Office is disrespectful to Nigeria, and this action should be a reason why Nigeria needs to improve. In our opinion, those statement is pathetic. First of all, Canada is a sovereign country like Nigeria, which means that it has every right to deny whoever it wants to deny visa. Nigeria does not have any jurisdiction over Canada. So, saying that it is disrespectful to Nigeria just because a top military brass was denied a visa is stupid. Besides, many Nigerians who are seeking for greener pastures in the West as a result of the pathetic situation in the country have been denied visas. Some of them even sold their properties and businesses just to be able to finance their departure outside. However, for some reason or the other, some of them are denied visas, sometimes for no valid reason, and they are forced to start from scratch in Nigeria. These cases are in the news every day, but never has the Nigerian government or Nigeria politicians expressed their concern in these situations. So what makes the top military brass different from ordinary Nigerians? Now, the second thing we want to point out is that the Nigerian politicians have said that the visa denial of the Nigerian CDS is an important reason why they need to make Nigeria work. But isn't that pathetic? Nigeria has been going from bad to worse. Nigerians are tired, struggling to make ends meet. The country, despite its abundant resources, cannot boast of basic infrastructure like 24 hours power supply. All these have been going on for years and should be enough reason for politicians to work hard and make Nigeria work. But it was only when a visa was denied that they found a reason to make Nigeria better. Nigerian politicians should be ashamed of themselves. The truth is that the West has never respected Africa and its leaders. Besides the fact that the West are racist and they feel superior to Africans, the fact is that African leaders have further cemented this view about Africa in the eyes of the West. The West sees African leaders as weak and incompetent who can control money and power. Even though the West has created a system that ensures that Africa remains poor, the fact is that no African leader has even thought of breaking their country from that system. These leaders are content to remain in this system because of greed and love for money and power. They only think about the present. They do not have grand ambitions like Western leaders who want their countries to dominate on the global stage. They do not have visions of their countries being industrialized and technologically advanced. These weak leaders are content to carry the narrative that Africa needs help because they will benefit from it. How pathetic. Yet these same African leaders would demand respect from the West, but this respect can never be given. When President Ruto first came into power, everyone hailed him as the champion of Africa because of his bold speeches. During a Pan-African Parliament summit in South Africa, President Ruto made a passionate pitch for the continent's return to pan-Africanism and protested against the continent's mistreatment by foreign powers in a speech that received a standing ovation from leaders. In his speech, Ruto bemoaned the blatant weakening of the individual sovereignty of Africa's more than 50 states, citing summits between Africa, a collective, and an individual power, such as the United States. The Kenyan president questioned why more than 50 African heads of state must travel to Washington to attend a US-Africa summit when they may appoint a troika to represent them all and report back to them. Ruto also revealed that the invitation from the US to attend the summit is signed off with threats of consequences for non-attendance. In other words, African leaders are required by Washington to drop any other engagement to fly out to America to meet with a sitting president like schoolboys and girls summoned by a headmaster. They are dined and wined in widely televised interactions that depict the power of the superpower in international relations. Worse, he claims, the presence of African leaders at these global conferences has been reduced to mere photo sessions in which more than 50 of them, dressed in suits and costumes, are lined up in a long queue towards a single microphone where they are each given a minute and a half to speak. This treatment of African leaders, he added, is unacceptable, and that all AU heads of state have decided that, from now on, any engagement with partners must be an engagement of equals. This means that any foreign power that wishes to engage with Africa must interact in a way that allows us to successfully represent our people, perform our mandate, and express our challenges. He also stated that the African Union Reform Program must be prioritized and that member states must develop functional continental governing mechanisms to support a worthy African Union. In another speech, during his maiden address at the United Nations General Assembly in September 2022, President Ruto told the World Bank and IMF that there was a need to change the existing financing reforms which are not favorable to the African continent. He also added that these international financial institutions should consider extending new reliefs to African countries facing serious debt crises. Speaking when he attended a summit of the Common Market for East and Southern Africa, held in Lusaka, Zambia, President Ruto called on the African Union, AU member states, to donate certain powers to the continental bloc as part of the much-needed reforms to make the body work. At the time, President Ruto was hailed as the new Gaddafi of Africa. But where is he today? President Ruto is a typical example of an average African leader who is all talk and no action. The same Ruto that blasted the West constantly in his early on in office has become a known puppet of the West. One article calls William Ruto the biggest political swindle of Africa's recent history, as well as a neo-colonial puppet masquerading as a pan-African to advance imperial interests across Africa. A former member of the parliament in Kenya, Kabando wa Kabando, questioned how Ruto can be regarded as another Nkrumah or Nyerere when his top ranks stink to the high heavens with corruption case after another. The same article from the Black Agenda report says that William Ruto talks right and walks left. If you take a look at some of his recent actions, you can't help but also say the same of him. In recent times, the same President Ruto who seemed to be anti-Western like Gaddafi has been called a dependable ally by Western countries. Now, the question is, should Africans trust any African leader who is a dependable Western ally? Given the history of past African leaders who are allies of the West, the answer to that is a big no. So, tell me, how can such a person be treated with respect? President Ruto called African leaders to ditch the dollar and focus on creating a single currency, but a few months later, the same president is negotiating deals with the IMF and World Bank, the primary enablers of dollar hegemony. In July 2023, Ruto went to the Pan-African Parliament Summit in Johannesburg, South Africa, and spoke passionately about Africa's shared destiny and the imperative to break free from Western influence, drawing a standing ovation from the audience. But hardly a month later, he was among the African leaders calling for the reinstatement of a Western-backed puppet president in Niger. From what we can see, William Ruto is passionately standing with Ukraine against Russia, eloquently emphasizing a rules-based order, but not with Niger, an African country, against French occupation. During the 5th mid-year AU meeting in July, he eloquently asserted that The Pan-African movement has always been about sovereignty and agency. Yet, during the UN General Assembly, he was the first to offer to send his soldiers to violate Haiti's sovereignty and undermine its agency on behalf of the US. On the same AU occasion, he spoke of Pan-African transformation through self-reliance. But only a little more than 1 month later, he offered to outsource Mombasa ports for grain imports from Ukraine instead of encouraging grain production in Kenya. The same President Ruto, who previously spoke glowingly about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, went ahead to sign the Economic Partnership Agreement with the European Union, which is in direct contravention of the AfCFTA agreement. So instead of African countries opening up their borders to each other for free trade between countries, thereby promoting African integration, African countries have to open their borders for Europe, encouraging increasing imports of European goods. So, based on all this, can we still call President Ruto a Pan-African? Does he still deserve to be compared to the likes of Gaddafi and Nkrumah? Julius Malema, president of the Economic Freedom Fighters South Africa, has also called out President Ruto on his recent actions. Malema stated that, "I don't know if President Ruto means it because he said so many things, and I can't locate these days because the things he said during the elections and the things he is doing now are two different things. I heard him say we need to do away with the dollar and build our own currency, but his actions are speaking of anything but eradicating the dollar." The people of Kenya have also complained about President Ruto that all the promises he made during the campaign have not been fulfilled. Things are even worse off than they were before he became president. Many Kenyans now call President William Ruto Zakayo, after the biblical tax collector Zacchaeus, who extracted every last penny from citizens' pockets. The reason for this is because the president recently signed a bill called the Finance Bill with the IMF and World Bank, which is expected to generate more than $2.1 billion for the government's depleted coffers. While it may look like a good idea for the government to generate more revenue, the bill included new taxes or increases on the price of basic goods such as fuel and food and mobile money transfers, as well as a controversial levy on all taxpayers to fund a housing scheme. As usual, all the policies given by the World Bank to Africa have not been beneficial, yet African governments like President Ruto keep accepting them. How then will Africa achieve the economic and political independence that African heroes fought for? Why is President Ruto cozying up to the West and seemingly turning his back on what he professed? Is it that he has no choice, or he is truly a two-faced leader who prefers to ally with the West? The fact is, as long as African leaders continue to behave like President Ruto, they will continue to be disrespected. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to like this video, drop a comment, and share.